The familiar thrum of motorcycle engines, usually a disquieting symphony to the town's inhabitants, was unexpectedly pierced by a child's earnest, high-pitched voice. Across the dusty expanse of the Lucky Devil's Saloon parking lot, a diminutive figure, almost swallowed by the bulk of a sputtering pickup, made her way toward the formidable silhouette of Hammer. He was a human edifice of leather and muscle, his beard a grizzled cascade, his face a weathered testament to sun and stoicism, etched with lines that told untold stories. A silver skull glinted from his vest. "Excuse me, sir." The voice piped up again, a shade louder. Hammer, mid-sentence in a gruff exchange with Toothpick about engine mechanics, paused. His gaze, slow and deliberate, lowered from Toothpick's craggy features to the small, resolute girl before him. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her wide, anxious eyes, framed by pigtails that bounced with every nervous shift of weight. In her outstretched hand, clutched with the reverence usually reserved for precious gems, were 3 crumpled dollar bills. With tiny, careful fingers, she unfolded the worn paper and pressed it into Hammer's massive palm. The contrast was striking. Her delicate hand against his calloused one. The flimsy currency a stark counterpoint to the heavy metal rings adorning his fingers. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Can you make the monsters go away?" Hammer's eyebrow, thick as a winter caterpillar, twitched. Toothpick, poised to snicker, caught Hammer's eye, and a sudden shared gravity silenced him. Hammer knelt, a slow, painstaking descent that seemed to stretch time, until his eyes met hers at their level. The movement, for such a colossal man, was unexpectedly tender. The mingled scents of leather and motor oil enveloped her, yet offered no menace. "Monsters?" he rumbled, his voice a low vibration that resonated in the air. "What kind of monsters, little one?" She shuffled her feet, her gaze flitting toward the imposing saloon facade behind them, before returning to his surprisingly gentle eyes. "Bad men. They break into my house at night, in my dreams. They're so loud, and they're always looking for me, and I can't sleep anymore." Her lower lip trembled, and a solitary tear carved a path down her dusty cheek. "My mom says they're just dreams, but they feel real, and I'm scared all the time." Hammer's jaw tightened. He looked at the $3 in his hand, then back at the girl's earnest, frightened face. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," she whispered. "All right, Lily," he said, his voice softer than any club member had ever heard it. "You came to the right place. We know a thing or two about making bad men go away." He exchanged a silent, meaningful glance with Toothpick, who nodded, a grim understanding dawning in his eyes. "Tell me where you live, Lily. We're going to take care of this." Later that afternoon, a procession of motorcycles, their roar somewhat subdued, pulled up to a modest, slightly worn house on the outskirts of town. Lily, perched proudly on the back of Hammer's bike, her tiny hands gripping his vest, pointed the way. Her mother, a woman with worry etched into every line of her face, emerged onto the porch, her eyes widening in alarm at the sight of the Hell's Angels. Hammer dismounted, taking Lily's hand. "Ma'am," he said, his voice surprisingly formal. "This here is Lily. She came to us with a problem. We're here to help." Lily's mother, Mrs. Peterson, appeared caught between apprehension and bewildered relief. "A problem?" she echoed, her gaze darting from her daughter to the formidable bikers. "Nightmares," Lily piped up, her voice regaining a measure of its earlier confidence now that her protectors had arrived. "About bad men." Hammer nodded. "We're going to make sure those bad men don't even think about coming near your house, ma'am. And we're going to help Lily sleep soundly again." What unfolded next would become legendary within the club. Hammer, accompanied by Toothpick and a few other members, systematically canvassed every room of Lily's house. Their tools were not weapons, but flashlights and an almost meticulous eye for detail. They tested windows, rattled doors, and checked locks. Lily, her small hand cradled in Hammer's enormous one, led the way, indicating the shadowy corners where the monsters lurked in her dreams. Hammer would sweep his light across the space, declare the corner clear, and then, with a serious expression, explain how a sturdy lock or a strategically placed object could enhance its safety. As the sun began its descent, casting elongated shadows, the bikers remained at their task. Big Mike and Grinder, two burly figures, were surprisingly nimble with wiring as they installed motion sensor lights around the house's perimeter. Hammer sat with Mrs. Peterson on the porch, patiently outlining basic home security measures, reinforcing door frames, pruning overgrown bushes that could provide concealment, and emphasizing the importance of an emergency plan. He spoke not with condescension, but with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. "We're going to turn this place into a fortress, ma'am," he assured her. "No boogeyman, real or imagined, is getting in here." Before their departure, Hammer drew Lily aside. He reached into his vest pocket and produced a small embroidered patch, a silver skull with wings, an exact, scaled-down replica of the one on his own vest. "This here," he said, carefully pinning it to the collar of her worn denim jacket, "is a special biker protection patch. You wear this, and any monster who sees it knows you're under our protection. It's a promise." Lily's eyes, wide with wonder, traced the intricate stitching. A genuine, radiant smile blossomed on her face. "Thank you," she whispered, fiercely hugging his leather-clad leg. Hammer's final act was perhaps his most profound. He handed Mrs. Peterson a card, not a club flyer, but one for a local trauma counseling service. "Nightmares, especially ones that vivid, they're not just about locks, ma'am," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes they're about bigger things. Things Lily needs to talk about with someone who knows how to listen. We made your house safe, but you gotta make her mind safe too." He paused, then added, "Those $3, they're still yours, Lily. Consider this our protection fee. Now go get some sleep." As the motorcycles rumbled away into the twilight, leaving behind a house bathed in the glow of new motion sensor lights, Lily stood on her porch, her hand clutching the biker patch. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the monsters in her head seemed to recede, replaced by the comforting image of a massive man on a roaring bike, a promise of safety in his eyes. The night, for once, felt less like an adversary and more like a quiet friend. What kind of monsters? The morning sun, usually a golden promise, felt like an accusing eye through Lily's bedroom window. She clutched the embroidered patch, its snarling wolf a surprisingly soft anchor against her cheek. Breakfast unfolded in a hushed ballet of clinking spoons. Her mother, Sarah, appeared drawn, the lingering phantom of yesterday's shock clouding her gaze. "Sweetheart, about last night," Sarah began, her voice a hesitant ripple. Lily stiffened. "The nice men. They were very kind, but they said the monsters wouldn't come." Lily interjected, her voice small but resolute. "They promised." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know, baby, and I appreciate their effort. But what kind of monsters are we truly talking about?" Lily stared into her cereal, idly tracing patterns with her spoon. The ones that whisper, the ones that slink into the dark corners when everyone's asleep. Her voice dropped to a barely audible murmur. The faceless ones. I know they're bad. Sarah's brow furrowed. She remembered the raw terror in Lily's eyes, the way her tiny frame would convulse in the dead of night. For years, she'd dismissed them as typical childhood phantoms. But yesterday, witnessing Lily's visceral panic, hearing the unwavering conviction in her daughter's voice had rattled her. Hammer's gruff mention of professional help echoed, a dissonant chord from a man whose exterior promised anything but gentle counsel. Later that afternoon, a seismic rumble vibrated through the quiet suburban street. Lily, absorbed in a doll's tea party on the porch, looked up, a faint smile gracing her lips. Hammer's colossal Harley idled at the curb, trailed by two more bikes, their chrome catching the pale sky like fleeting sparks. The men dismounted, their heavy boots thudding a rhythmic bass on the pavement. "Afternoon, Lilybug," Hammer rumbled, his voice unexpectedly mellow. "We're here for our perimeter check." Sarah emerged from the house, a complex tapestry of apprehension and reluctant gratitude etched on her face. "Mr. Hammer, you genuinely don't have to." "A promise is a promise, ma'am," Hammer countered, his gaze unwavering. "Besides, it's good practice." He turned to Lily. "So, these monsters, what's their modus operandi? Do they target windows? Do they favor shadowy nooks? We need reconnaissance for our monster defense strategy." Lily, emboldened by his earnestness, pointed to the side of the house. "They try the living room window there, and the back door. They rattle it. And sometimes I hear them near my bedroom." Hammer nodded gravely, producing a small notepad from his vest pocket. "Rattling. Noted. And sounds near the bedroom. Critical intelligence." He then dispatched Grizzly, a burly figure, surprisingly agile for his size, to inspect the living room window. Grizzly checked the latch, then knelt to examine the frame with meticulous care. "Looks sturdy enough, boss," he reported, "but perhaps a secondary lock, just in case." Hammer turned to Sarah. "We can install those for you, if you'd like. Simple, effective. A little extra peace of mind." Sarah, taken aback by their thoroughness, found herself nodding. "Yes, please. That would be very helpful." Shadow, another biker, drifted towards the back door, his eyes methodically scanning the hinges and lock. He produced a small, high-pitched device. "Motion sensor, boss. Set it up here. Links to a subtle alarm. Nothing loud, just enough to alert you to an unwelcome presence." Lily watched, her eyes wide, a curious blend of fear and fascination. These men weren't merely humoring her. They were treating her invisible threats as concrete, solvable problems. Hammer knelt beside her again. "And the whispering monsters? We can't lock those out, Lilybug. But sometimes, when things feel too overwhelming inside our heads, it helps to talk to someone who understands all kinds of monsters. Someone who can teach you how to quiet those whispers." He met Sarah's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. Sarah swallowed, the weight of his suggestion settling heavily. The bikers worked with practiced efficiency, installing new locks and setting up the motion sensor. They even demonstrated the small alarms function to Sarah. As dusk began to bleed long shadows across the yard, Hammer addressed Lily one last time. "Remember, Lily," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "This patch means we're standing guard, day and night. And when the whispers come, tell your mom. She'll know what comes next." As their bikes roared away, leaving a lingering scent of exhaust and leather, a strange quiet descended upon the house. It wasn't the suffocating silence of dread, but a new kind of stillness, laced with a fragile sense of security. Sarah found Lily, holding the patch, a faint, genuine smile gracing her lips. The child looked up at her mother. "They're really gone, aren't they, Mama?" Lily whispered, a nascent hope blossoming in her voice. Sarah knelt, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. The battle against the whispers and shadows was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope that they now had allies in the fight. The monsters were not just imaginary, she realized, but echoes of a deeper, unspoken terror. And maybe, just maybe, Hammer was right. Maybe someone else could help them face those. A promise made. The crisp morning air carried the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the lingering unease in Sarah's mind. Lily, surprisingly, had slept through the night. Not a single whimper, not a single dash to her mother's bed. It was a small victory, but one Sarah clung to fiercely. The quiet hum of an approaching motorcycle broke the stillness, and Sarah braced herself. Hammer, true to his word, was back. He dismounted with a fluid grace that belied his imposing stature, his leather vest creaking faintly. Lily, usually wary of strangers, peered around the doorframe with a curious intensity. Hammer met her gaze, a small, almost imperceptible nod passing between them. He carried a heavy toolbox, its contents clinking softly with each step. "Morning, Sarah. Lilybug," he rumbled, his voice a low thrum. "Ready for some monster proofing?" Lily's eyes widened, a flicker of something akin to excitement replacing the usual apprehension. Sarah, however, felt a fresh wave of apprehension. This was all so unconventional. Hammer didn't wait for an invitation, stepping inside and surveying the living room with a professional eye. "First things first, let's look at the entry points." He moved with purpose, checking the front door, the windows, even peering into the small, rarely used back entrance. Lily, emboldened by his presence, shadowed him, occasionally pointing to a shadow or a creak that had previously sent her into a panic. Hammer listened to each of her observations with a grave sincerity, never once dismissing her fears as childish fantasy. He installed a heavy-duty deadbolt on the front door, his powerful hands making light work of the task. He showed Sarah how to properly engage it, his instructions clear and concise. Then came the motion sensor lights. He placed them strategically around the perimeter of the house, demonstrating their blinding flash with a satisfying click. Lily shrieked with a delighted gasp each time they flared to life, her laughter echoing through the house, a sound Sarah hadn't heard in weeks. "See that, Lilybug?" Hammer said, kneeling to her level. "Anything tries to sneak around, those lights'll tell 'em to scram, and if they don't, we'll know about it." The "we" hung in the air, a comforting weight. Sarah watched him, a slow understanding dawning. He wasn't just securing the house, he was securing Lily's sense of safety. Later, as the afternoon sun dappled through the living room window, Hammer sat on the worn armchair, a small embroidered patch in his hand. It depicted a stylized eagle, wings spread wide, clutching a thunderbolt. "This here," he said, handing it to Lily, "is a biker protection patch. Means you're under our wing. Any monster tries to mess with you, they gotta deal with us first." Lily held the patch as if it were spun from starlight, her small fingers tracing the rough embroidery. Her face, usually pinched with worry, was soft, almost serene. Then Hammer turned to Sarah, his expression softening further. "Sarah, about what we discussed. For Lily. And maybe for you too. There's a woman, Dr. Evelyn Reed. She specializes in, folks who've seen things they shouldn't have. She's got a way of helping people put the pieces back together." He handed her a slip of paper with a name and number, his eyes holding hers steadily. No pressure, but it might make a difference. Sarah looked at the small piece of paper, then at Lily, who was now carefully pinning the patch to her favorite stuffed rabbit. The biker, the intimidating figure from the dusty road, had somehow become a conduit for hope. He wasn't offering a quick fix, but a comprehensive approach, addressing not just the external threats but the internal wounds. "Thank you, Hammer," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." He simply nodded, his gaze lingering on Lily. "A promise made, Sarah. A promise kept." He stood, the leather of his vest groaning softly. "We'll be around, just a call away." As his motorcycle rumbled away, leaving a faint scent of exhaust and oil, Sarah felt a profound shift. The house felt different, not just safer, but lighter. The heavy cloak of fear that had enveloped them for so long had begun to fray, revealing patches of sunlit possibility. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt she wasn't walking it alone. She clutched the doctor's number, a fragile seed of hope, taking root in the fertile ground of a biker's unexpected compassion. Unexpected visitors. The sharp rap on the front door sliced through the fragile morning quiet. Sarah, still nursing a lukewarm mug of herbal tea, flinched, nearly sloshing liquid onto her pajamas. She glanced at the clock. Barely 8. Who would be calling at this hour? Lily, who'd been meticulously arranging her miniature animal figurines on the living room rug, froze, her small hands clutching a ceramic rabbit. "Don't worry, sweetie," Sarah said, her voice a little too bright, a little too quick. "Probably just a delivery." Her own heart, however, was already doing a nervous jig. Hammer had assured her the house was secure, a fortress. Yet the sound of an unexpected visitor still triggered a primal unease. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A tall, impeccably dressed woman with steel gray hair, pulled back in a severe bun, stood on her porch, holding a sleek leather brief. Beside her, a man in a dark suit, his expression unreadable, held a device that looked suspiciously like a tablet. Neither looked like they were delivering anything other than bad news. Sarah opened the door a crack, the chain still engaged. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice strained. The woman offered a polite, but not warm, smile. "Good morning, Ms. Evans. My name is Agent Thorne, and this is Agent Miller. We're with the Bureau of Paranormal Investigations. May we have a moment of your time?" Sarah's breath hitched. Paranormal investigations? Her mind raced, grasping for any logical explanation. Had Hammer mentioned something? No, this was completely unexpected. She thought of Lily's nightmares, of the unsettling shadows that still danced in her own periphery. "The Bureau of what now?" Sarah stammered, her grip tightening on the doorknob. Agent Thorne's smile didn't falter. "We understand this might sound unusual. However, we have reason to believe you may possess information pertinent to an ongoing investigation. Specifically, regarding events that transpired approximately 3 months ago, near the old quarry." The quarry. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sarah felt a cold dread seep into her bones. This wasn't about monsters in Lily's dreams. This was about her monsters, the ones she'd buried so deep. She'd almost convinced herself they were gone. I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah lied, her voice barely a whisper. She tried to close the door, but Agent Thorne's foot, surprisingly quick, nudged it open just enough to prevent it. "Ms. Evans, we're not here to accuse you of anything," Agent Miller said, his voice calm, almost soothing, a stark contrast to the sternness of his partner. We simply want to understand. There were anomalies detected in that area, energy signatures, and your vehicle was identified as being present during that window. Lily, drawn by the hushed, intense conversation, had edged closer. Her small face was a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Agent Thorne's gaze flickered to the child, then back to Sarah. "Perhaps this isn't the best place for this discussion," she suggested, her tone hardening slightly. "May we come in?" Sarah's mind was a whirlwind. Hammer had gone to such lengths to protect them, to create a sense of normalcy. Now, these people, with their official titles and cryptic questions, threatened to unravel everything. She thought of Dr. Reed, of the promise of healing. She couldn't let them drag her back into that darkness, especially not with Lily so close. "No," Sarah said, finding a sudden surge of resolve. "Whatever this is, I don't know anything about it, and I won't discuss it in front of my daughter." Agent Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Ms. Evans, obstructing a federal investigation carries severe penalties." "I'm not obstructing anything," Sarah retorted, her voice gaining strength. "I'm protecting my child. If you have questions, you can leave your contact information. My lawyer will be in touch." The words felt foreign, yet empowering. Hammer's influence, she realized, was already taking root. He'd taught her to stand her ground. Agent Miller stepped forward slightly, his expression softening. "We understand this is difficult, Ms. Evans, but we're not the enemy. We're trying to prevent future incidents. People were hurt." The mention of hurt people sent a fresh wave of guilt through Sarah. She remembered the fear, the desperation, the impossible choices she'd made that night, but she wouldn't let them see her vulnerability. Not now, not here. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'm sorry, but I have nothing to tell you. Please leave." Agent Thorne studied her for a long moment, then gave a curt nod to Agent Miller. "Very well, Ms. Evans. We'll be in touch." She handed Sarah a business card with a crisp, official logo. "We have ways of gathering information, regardless." With that thinly veiled threat, they turned and descended the porch steps, their dark suits contrasting sharply with the bright morning sun. Sarah watched them go, her hand still clutched around the business card, feeling a tremor run through her. The monster-proof house suddenly felt less secure, and the fragile peace Hammer had worked so hard to build seemed to shatter around her. Lily, sensing the shift in her mother, wrapped her arms around Sarah's leg, looking up with wide, questioning eyes. "Mommy, who were those people?" she whispered. Sarah knelt, pulling Lily into a tight hug. "Just some confusing people, sweetheart. Don't worry. Everything's going to be okay." But as she said the words, a cold certainty settled in her stomach. This was far from over. The past wasn't just knocking, it was pounding on the door. And this time, it wasn't just her own monsters she had to face. There were bigger, more official monsters now, and they were very interested in her secrets. House hunt for shadows. The oppressive silence that followed the agent's departure was far more unnerving than their clipped questions. Sarah stood by the closed door, her hand still resting on the cool metal of the knob, listening to the crunch of gravel as their sedan pulled away. Lily, who had been curled on the sofa, a picture book clutched to her chest, looked up, her wide eyes questioning. "Are they gone, Mama?" Her voice was a reedy whisper, barely disturbing the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. "Yes, baby, all gone." Sarah forced a smile, though her jaw ached from the tension. She walked over, sinking onto the sofa beside Lily, pulling her close. The small body felt fragile in her arms. Just some lost men asking for directions. Nothing for you to worry about, Lily nodded, but her gaze darted towards the windows, then back to the door. Sarah knew the lie hadn't fully settled. The air itself felt thin, stretched taut. The agents' veiled threats, their talk of anomalies and quarries, had cracked open a door Sarah had slammed shut years ago, a door she had hoped would remain bolted forever. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, a restless sleep punctuated by soft whimpers, Sarah found herself pacing the living room. The familiar comfort of her home now felt porous. Every creak of the old floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, sounded amplified, sinister. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over Hammer's contact, her pride warred with a rising tide of fear. She had always prided herself on handling things, on being self-sufficient. But this was different. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about Lily. She called. Hammer answered on the second ring, his voice a low rumble. "Sarah? Everything all right?" "No," she admitted, the word a ragged exhale. She recounted the visit, the agent's pointed questions, her firm denials. She omitted the deeper fear, the chilling recognition of what they were hinting at, the secret she guarded more fiercely than her own life. They were asking about a quarry, about strange occurrences. A pause stretched, then Hammer's voice returned, devoid of its usual gruff warmth. "I see. And you told them nothing?" "Of course not. What do they know? What could they possibly know?" Her voice rose, edged with desperation. "I need you to send some of your guys, just to be around for a few days, just to make sure they don't come back." Hammer was silent again, and Sarah could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "Sarah," he said finally, his tone gentle but firm, "you know the drill. We don't just be around. We do things right. But before we do anything, you need to tell me everything. Not just what they asked, but why they asked it. What really happened at that quarry?" Her breath hitched. He wasn't going to let her off the hook, not this time. He was pushing her, subtly but inexorably, towards the truth. I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sarah," he repeated, "Lily's monsters aren't just in her head anymore. And they're not just the boogeymen you pay us to scare away. It sounds like your monsters are starting to show up at the door. And if you want them gone for good, you're going to have to let me see them too." A cold knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. She knew he was right. She had built a fortress of silence around her past, believing it protected them. Now, that fortress was crumbling, and the shadows within were starting to leak out. She looked at the closed door of Lily's room, a sliver of light escaping from under it. Lily's soft breathing was the only sound she could hear. "Okay," Sarah said, the word a painful concession. "Come over tomorrow. I'll tell you everything I can." As she hung up, the house still felt exposed, vulnerable. She walked to the window, peering out into the moonless night. The streetlights cast long, skeletal shadows, and for the first time in the years, Sarah felt the unsettling prickle of being watched, not by her daughter's imagined monsters, but by something far more real, something that had finally caught up. The house hunt had begun, not for a tangible intruder, but for the shadows of her own haunted past. Lights in the darkness. The oppressive quiet of the woods pressed in, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the truck's engine. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Lily, usually a restless ball of energy, was unnaturally still in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed on the deepening shadows beyond the windshield. The agent's veiled threats had chipped away at the fragile peace Sarah had painstakingly built. Now, the full weight of her past threatened to collapse everything. Hammer sat beside her, a stoic presence that, surprisingly, brought a sliver of comfort. He hadn't pressed for details on the drive, simply letting the silence stretch, occasionally glancing at Lily. Sarah appreciated the unspoken understanding. She knew she had to tell him everything, and the quarry, with its stark, open wounds, felt like the only place to finally unearth the truth. As they pulled onto the gravel track leading to the old quarry, a chill snaked up Sarah's spine. The air grew heavy, thick with memories she'd tried to bury. The moonlight, now filtering through a thin veil of clouds, cast distorted shadows from the jagged rock faces. It was a place of stark beauty and profound dread. They parked near the edge, the truck's headlights cutting through the gloom. Lily, sensing the shift in atmosphere, instinctively reached for Sarah's hand. "Mommy, it's dark," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Just a little adventure." But her voice lacked conviction. Hammer killed the engine, plunging them into near-total darkness, save for the distant glint of the moon on the quarry's water. Then, with a click, he activated a powerful handheld spotlight, sweeping its beam across the desolate landscape. The harsh light revealed the sheer drops, the scattered debris, and the dark, still water far below. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. She took a deep breath, the cold air burning her lungs. "This is where it all started." Hammer nodded, the beam of his light settling on a specific section of the quarry wall. A small, almost imperceptible fissure in the rock. "Tell me," he urged, his voice low but firm. Sarah's gaze followed the light. "My parents. They weren't just geologists. They were involved in something else. Something dangerous. They believed there were energies here. Anomalies. Things that could be harnessed." She swallowed, hard, the words catching in her throat. "They brought me here often, not just to play, but to observe, to feel it." Lily, her fear momentarily forgotten, looked from her mother to Hammer, then back at the quarry, her small brow furrowed in confusion. "What kind of energies?" Hammer asked, his spotlight still fixed on the fissure. "They called them resonance points, places where the veil between worlds was thin," Sarah explained, the old terminology spilling out with a disturbing familiarity. "They thought they could use these points to access other dimensions, to communicate with entities." The last word was a whisper, a ghost of her childhood terror. Hammer's expression remained unreadable, but his grip on the spotlight tightened. "And the entities," Sarah shuddered. "They weren't benevolent, not always. My parents, they changed, obsessed. They started to see things, hear things. They called them visitors. But to me, they were monsters." Her voice cracked. "One night, they brought me here. They were trying to open a stronger channel, a gateway." She gestured vaguely towards the fissure. Something went wrong. There was a flash of light, a sound like the world was tearing apart, and then they were gone. Lily gasped softly, clutching Sarah's arm. "Gone?" Hammer's voice was sharper now. "Vanished, without a trace. The authorities said it was an accident, a rock slide. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt." Sarah's eyes, wide and haunted, met Hammer's. "The monsters, Hammer. They were real, and they took my parents." The spotlight beam wavered slightly as Hammer absorbed her words. He slowly panned the light across the quarry face, the enormity of her confession hanging heavy in the air. And you think these anomalies, these visitors, are what Lily sees? Sarah nodded, tears finally tracking paths down her dusty cheeks. She has nightmares, Hammer. She screams about shadows, about things watching her. It's the same fear I had, the same fear I've carried my whole life. I tried to protect her, to shield her from it, but I think it followed me. Or maybe it's in her too. Hammer's gaze returned to Sarah, the powerful beam of light briefly illuminating the raw vulnerability in her eyes. The cold wind picked up, rustling the dry leaves on the ground, a sound like a whispered warning. The quarry, bathed in the stark light and deep shadows, felt less like a place of secrets and more like a wound, finally exposed, a shield and a promise. The oppressive silence of the quarry deepened, broken only by the distant caw of a crow and the gentle lapping of water against the rock face below. Lily, pressed against Sarah's side, shuddered despite the afternoon warmth. Hammer's eyes, usually sharp and assessing, softened almost imperceptibly as he watched the girl. He knelt, bringing himself closer to her, level. "Lilybug," he said, his voice a low rumble that nonetheless carried a surprising gentleness. "Your mommy told me about the bad dreams, about the shadows." Lily peeked up, her eyes wide and wary. She didn't flinch, a testament to the strange trust she'd developed for the imposing man. "They whisper," she managed, her voice barely audible. "And they watch." Hammer nodded slowly. "I believe you. Sometimes things whisper in the dark, things that aren't really there, just trying to scare you." He glanced at Sarah, a subtle question in his gaze, but his attention quickly returned to Lily. "But sometimes," he continued, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "there are things that are there, and they don't like it when someone stands up to them." He pulled a small, intricately carved wooden bird from his vest pocket. It was dark, almost black, with smooth, polished edges. "My grandma gave me this when I was a little guy," he explained, holding it out. "Said it was a spirit bird. Said it would watch over me, keep the bad things away." He placed it gently in Lily's small hand. "It's yours now. It'll watch over you." Lily's fingers closed around the bird, her eyes fixed on it. A flicker of something akin to wonder, or perhaps just a momentary distraction from fear, crossed her face. Sarah watched, a knot in her stomach loosening just a fraction. "We need to go back to your house, Sarah," Hammer said, rising. His voice was firm, the gentle tone reserved solely for Lily now gone. "We need to see what's there, if anything." Back at the dilapidated house, the late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the overgrown yard. The air inside felt heavy, stagnant, despite the windows being open. Hammer moved through the rooms with a methodical efficiency, his gaze sweeping over every corner, every piece of worn furniture. He wasn't looking for intruders. Sarah knew that. He was looking for something else. He paused in Lily's bedroom, his eyes lingering on a faint, almost invisible scratch mark high on the wall above her bed. It looked like a claw mark, though it was too faint to be certain. He touched it lightly, then ran his hand along the wall, his brow furrowed in thought. "This isn't just bad dreams, is it, Sarah?" he asked, his voice low. "It's physical. Something's leaving marks." Sarah swallowed, her throat tight. "I don't know what to do, Hammer. I don't know how to stop it." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You're not alone anymore. We're going to put some eyes on this place. Motion sensors, cameras, The whole 9 yards. If something's here, we'll see it. We'll know. He spent the next hour making calls, his phone pressed to his ear. Soon, a handful of his crew arrived, their burly forms incongruous in the quiet, unassuming house. They moved with surprising quietude, installing discrete cameras in strategic locations, stringing up motion-activated lights around the perimeter. The house, once a fortress against the outside world, was being transformed into a different kind of stronghold. While they worked, Hammer pulled Sarah aside. "This isn't going to make it disappear," he said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "Not what you're dealing with. This is a shield, a promise that we're watching. But you, Sarah, you still need to face what's behind all this." His words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the unspoken past she carried. He was pushing her, gently but relentlessly, towards the truth she'd buried for so long. The monsters were not just Lily's nightmares. They were echoes of Sarah's own trauma, manifesting in terrifying ways. Later, as dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, Hammer knelt once more beside Lily's bed, the wooden bird still clutched in her hand. "You feel safe now, little one?" he asked. Lily nodded, her eyes heavy-lidded. "The bird is watching," she whispered, her voice already fading into sleep. Hammer stood, his gaze meeting Sarah's across the dim room. "The club will be here, Sarah. Someone will always be here. We'll make sure Lily sleeps soundly." A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled her knees, washed over Sarah. It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was a reprieve, a promise, a shield. And for the first time in a very long time, Sarah felt a flicker of hope that the battle might not be hers alone to fight. She knew Hammer was right. The deeper fight was still hers to wage. But tonight, Lily would sleep. And tonight Sarah wouldn't be staring into the darkness, utterly alone. A different kind of helper. The clatter of the kitchen door closing echoed through the quiet house as Hammer slipped out, leaving Sarah to her uneasy thoughts. He didn't head for his bike, though. Instead, he circled the perimeter of the small property, his eyes scanning every shadow, every rustling bush. The motion-activated lights he'd installed the previous night now stood sentinel, their stark beams cutting through the gloom, momentarily illuminating patches of overgrown ivy and the weathered siding of the house. He checked each window, not just for signs of forced entry, but for anything out of place. A disturbed spiderweb, a faint impression in the soft earth beneath the sills. He paused at the back of the house, where the overgrown garden bordered a dense thicket of trees. The air here was cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. He'd seen the slight disturbance in the soil yesterday, the faint, unnatural indentations. Today, he found another. Not a footprint, not exactly. More like a pressure point, as if something heavy had rested there, leaving a shallow, almost imperceptible depression. He knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the outline. It wasn't the kind of mark a human would make. It was too broad, too diffuse, lacking the defined edges of a boot or shoe. A low growl rumbled in his chest. His instincts, honed by years of living on the edge, screamed at him. This wasn't just a child's nightmare. This was real. Back at the clubhouse, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the quiet tension he'd left behind. The scent of stale beer and exhaust fumes hung heavy in the air. Bones sat hunched over a laptop, its screen casting an eerie blue glow on his face. Patch was polishing his boots, his movements precise and deliberate. "Anything?" Hammer asked, his voice cutting through the desultory hum of the building. Bones straightened, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Got a hit on that frequency you gave me. Faint, intermittent, but definitely there. Not from any known device. And it's localized around Sarah's place. He tapped a few keys, bringing up a complex waveform on the screen. Looks like some kind of resonance, like a tuning fork vibrating at an impossible frequency. Patch looked up, his one good eye narrowed. So, not just a spooked kid, then? No, Hammer confirmed, running a hand over his shaved head. And I found something else. Marks in the garden. Not human. And not animal. Unless we've got a new species of giant, shapeless slug roaming the woods. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the photos he'd taken. Bones peered at them, his brow furrowed. That's odd. The ground isn't just disturbed, it looks like it's been compressed. Exactly, Hammer said. Whatever it is, it's heavy, and it's been there more than once. He turned to Patch. Lily's still having the dreams. Sarah's barely holding it together. We need to keep a tighter watch. Consider it done, Patch said, his voice gravelly. I'll set up a rotation. No one goes near that house without a brother on watch. Good, Hammer nodded. And Bones, I need you to dig deeper into Sarah's parents. Everything. Their academic work, their research, any associates, anything that could explain this. He gestured vaguely towards the laptop screen. Lily's nightmares, these monsters. They might be connected to whatever her parents were doing. Bones looked up, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. You think they were involved in something other? Hammer met his gaze. I think we're past the point of coincidence, Bones. Sarah's parents were researchers, right? Scientists. And her kid is seeing things that aren't supposed to exist. There's a link there. I can feel it. Later that afternoon, Hammer found Sarah sitting on the porch swing, staring blankly at the overgrown rose bushes. She clutched a mug of lukewarm coffee, her knuckles white. Hey, he said softly, sitting beside her. The swing creaked under his weight. She jumped, startled, then offered a weak smile. Oh, Hammer. Didn't hear you. Rough night? She sighed, a long, weary exhalation. Lily woke up screaming again. Said the man with the dark eyes was standing over her bed. Just watching. She shivered, despite the warmth of the afternoon sun. I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. Nightlights, talking, even sleeping in her room. Hammer reached out, his calloused hand gently covering hers. We'll figure it out, Sarah. But you need to help me. You need to tell me everything you remember about your parents' work. Anything, no matter how small or insignificant it seems. She pulled her hand away, her gaze distant. I don't know much. They were always in their lab, always talking about dimensional matrices and quantum entanglement. It sounded like gibberish to me. I was just a kid. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But sometimes I'd hear noises, strange sounds coming from downstairs, and the air would feel thin, cold, even in summer. Hammer listened intently, every word a potential piece of the puzzle. What kind of noises, Sarah? Can you describe them? She closed her eyes, a faint tremor running through her. Like humming, but deep. And sometimes a sort of buzzing, like a million angry bees, and the shadows. They'd seem to move, even when there was no breeze. She opened her eyes, meeting his. I thought I was just imagining things, a scared kid, but now... Her voice trailed off, filled with a dawning horror. Now you think it wasn't just your imagination? Hammer finished for her. He squeezed her hand again, a silent promise. We're going to get to the bottom of this, Sarah. For Lily. And for you. His gaze was steady, unwavering. He knew what she needed, even if she couldn't articulate it herself. She needed someone to believe her, to validate her deepest fears. And he was going to be that someone. "But what if?" she began, her voice trembling. "No what ifs," Hammer interrupted, his tone firm but gentle. "Only what now? And what now is? We fight back. Together." He let the words sink in, watching the faint flicker of hope in her eyes. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was shrouded in shadows, leading to a truth more terrifying than any nightmare. But they wouldn't walk it alone. Fading shadows. The oppressive August air, thick with unspoken anxieties, pressed down on Sarah's small home. Outside, the familiar rumble of Hammer's Harley sliced through the quiet, followed by the deeper thrum of several other engines. Lily, perched precariously on the sofa arm, flinched with each new sound, her small face etched with a primal fear far exceeding a child's usual shyness. Hammer strode in, his leather vest surprisingly unblemished despite recent subterranean excursions. His gaze, a quick scan of Sarah's weary eyes, softened considerably as it landed on Lily. "All right, Buttercup," he rumbled, his voice a low growl laced with unexpected tenderness. "Time to roll out." Behind him, 4 burly club members fanned out, their collective presence dwarfing the modest living room. A diverse crew, Wrench, a burly mechanic whose fingernails seemed permanently stained with grease. Ghost, a lean, quiet man whose observant eyes missed nothing. Doc, a surprisingly cerebral biker who meticulously carried a first aid kit in his saddlebag. And Dice, whose booming laugh could, and often did, rattle foundations. Sarah watched them, a flicker of apprehension battling a strange wave of relief. These were hardly the guardians she'd imagined, yet here they stood. "Lily, honey, these are Hammer's friends," Sarah offered, attempting a lightness she didn't feel. "They're here to help us keep bad things out." Clutching her threadbare teddy bear, Lily slid from the sofa and approached Hammer with hesitant steps. From her shorts pocket, she produced 3 crumpled dollar bills, meticulously smoothing them before pressing them into his calloused palm. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, "make the monsters go away." Hammer's broad shoulders seemed to subtly sag. He knelt, bringing himself to her level. "What kind of monsters, kiddo?" he asked, his tone softer than Sarah had ever heard. "Bad men," Lily confessed, her lower lip trembling. "They break into my room at night. I can't sleep anymore." Her wide, tear-filled eyes implored him. Hammer's jaw tightened. He exchanged a silent question with Sarah, then turned back to Lily. "All right, sweet pea," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "We're not just making them go away. We're making sure they can't even think about coming here." He rose, his gaze sweeping over his men. "Listen up. Wrench, perimeter. Check every window, every door. Loose hinge, flimsy lock. You fix it. Ghost, you're with Lily. She'll show you her room, tell you where the shadows hide." He paused. "Doc, Dice, you're with me. We're installing serious lighting, motion sensors, tripwires if necessary." The men nodded, moving with an unexpected efficiency that belied their rough exteriors. Ghost, with an almost startling gentleness, knelt to Lily's height. "Hey there, partner. Think you can show me the secret spots where those bad men try to hide?" After a moment's hesitation, Lily nodded, taking his hand and leading him toward her bedroom. Sarah watched them go, a knot of emotion tightening in her chest. This was far more than she'd ever dared to hope for. As Wrench began his meticulous exterior inspection, Hammer turned to Sarah. "Tell me more about your parents, Sarah. Anything. Everything. the dimensional matrix, the quantum entanglement. What exactly were they doing? Sarah wrung her hands. It was abstract, academic. They had a lab in the basement. I recall strange hums, sometimes a piercing whine, and shadows, always shadows. They'd shift, almost as if they were breathing, she shuddered. They called it observing, the liminal space. Said they were trying to map the interdimensional void. Hammer's eyes narrowed. Liminal space, void. Sounds suspiciously like what I've been finding in your garden. Residual energy, a kind of bleed-through. He pulled a small black device from his pocket, its screen displaying a fluctuating green line. This is a frequency scanner, the localized anomaly I picked up. It's unlike anything I've ever encountered. It almost mirrors the energy signature of the impressions I found, like a footprint, but not from anything human. His words sent an icy tendril down Sarah's spine. You think Lily's nightmares, my parents' work. They're connected. I don't think, I know, Hammer stated, his voice devoid of doubt. Your parents weren't simply observing. They were interacting. And something breached, or they opened a door that should have remained shut. He gestured to the humming device. This frequency, it's a signature. If we can understand its source, we can understand what's trying to get at Lily. He paused, his gaze intense. And we need to find out what the hell your parents were truly trying to achieve. Because if they were trying to protect humanity from what's beyond the veil, they did a remarkably poor job. And if they were trying to bring it here... His words hung heavy, a chilling implication that crystallized Sarah's deepest fears. The shadows in Lily's room, the impressions in the garden, the strange frequencies. It was all coalescing into a terrifying reality. Her parents hadn't been eccentric scientists. They had been toying with forces beyond their comprehension. And now, Lily was paying the price. Ghost reappeared, Lily's hand in his, a small, triumphant smile gracing her face. Ghost found the monster's hiding spot under my bed, she announced proudly. He put a "No monsters allowed" sign there. Hammer's stern expression softened. He pulled a small embroidered patch from his vest, depicting a snarling wolf head. Here, Lilybug, this is your official biker protection patch. You wear this, and any monster that even considers coming near you will have to answer to the whole pack. Lily clutched the patch, her eyes wide with wonder. Thank you, Hammer, she whispered, genuine relief washing over her small face. As the bikers began their work, a faint, fragile, yet precious sense of peace settled over the house. The physical fortifications were crucial, but the true strength lay in the solidarity, in the promise that Lily was no longer alone against the things that lurked in the dark. But Sarah knew this was merely the prelude. The shadows might be receding, but the truth behind them still waited to be unearthed, and she had a terrifying feeling it would prove far more perilous than any nightmare. The bravest girl, the dawnlight, usually a comforting friend, felt thin and fragile through Lily's bedroom window. She sat bolt upright in her bed, her small frame trembling, the echoes of the nightmare still clinging to her like a shroud. The bad men were clearer this time, their faces indistinct, but their intent palpable, their shadows long and grasping. Her small hands clutched the tattered teddy bear, its once fluffy ear now limp from countless nights of desperate comfort. A soft knock startled her. Lilybug, everything all right? Sarah's voice, raspy with sleep, was a balm. Lily scrambled out of bed, her bare feet silent on the worn rug. She flung open the door, burying her face in her mother's nightgown. They were here again, Mommy, she whispered. the words muffled by the fabric. They wanted to get me. Sarah held her tight, stroking her hair. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Hammer's here. No one's getting you. She carried Lily back to bed, tucking her in, her eyes sweeping the room, searching for any sign of disturbance beyond a child's vivid imagination. But she knew. She felt it too, a pervasive chill that had seeped into the very foundations of their home. Later that morning, the kitchen was a tableau of controlled chaos. Hammer, surprisingly domestic in a worn leather vest over a plain t-shirt, was methodically scrubbing a coffee pot. One of his men, a burly individual named Grizz, was diligently fixing a squeaky cabinet door, his massive fingers surprisingly adept with a screwdriver. Lily, still pale but with a spark of curiosity in her eyes, watched them from the doorway, clutching her teddy. Hammer caught her gaze. Morning trouble. Sleep well? Lily shook her head, her lower lip trembling. No. The men came. Hammer put down the coffee pot, his expression softening. He knelt, bringing himself to her level. Tell me about these men, Lily. What do they do? They want to get in my room, she whispered, glancing nervously at the hallway. They scratch at the windows, and they make noises. What kind of noises? He pressed gently, his voice a low rumble. Like whispers, and sometimes like something's trying to push through a wall. Her eyes, wide and fearful, locked onto his. They're very scary, Hammer. He nodded slowly, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. I understand, sweetie, and you're a very brave girl for telling me. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small tarnished silver coin. This is a special coin. It keeps bad things away. You keep it under your pillow, okay? And if those noises get too loud, you just tap it 3 times, and I promise we'll hear it. Lily took the coin, her fingers tracing the worn eagle etched into its surface. A tiny flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. Really? Really? Hammer affirmed, giving her a reassuring smile before rising. Sarah watched the exchange, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Hammer's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the growing panic she felt. His belief in Lily's monsters was unsettling, yet strangely comforting. He wasn't dismissing her. Hammer, she said, her voice barely above a whisper when Lily had wandered off to play. What are we dealing with here? Really? He ran a hand over his shaved head. I've been doing some digging. Your parents' research, the liminal spaces, the interdimensional voids. They weren't just theoretical physicists, Sarah. They were trying to open something. Sarah felt a cold dread seep into her bones. Open what? A door, Hammer said grimly. A door to places that aren't meant to be opened. And from what I'm gathering, they succeeded, at least partially. That house, this land, it's a nexus point now. Whatever they let in, it's here for Lily. Or perhaps because of Lily. Because of Lily? Sarah gasped, a wave of protectiveness washing over her. Children are often more susceptible, he explained, his gaze distant. More open. Their minds haven't built up the same walls we have. And if those entities are feeding on fear, a child's fear, it's potent. The implications were staggering, horrifying. Her parents, the brilliant scientists, the loving but often distant figures, had unleashed something unspeakable. And now, her daughter was paying the price. So, what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Hammer turned, his eyes piercing. We fight back. We seal the breaches they made. We protect Lily. And we figure out what exactly they were trying to do, and why. He paused. looking out the window at the dense woods bordering their property. And we need to be prepared for company, not just the things scratching at Lily's window. Who? Sarah asked, a new fear rising. Anyone interested in what your parents were doing, the ones who might have been funding them, or trying to replicate their work. They'll be looking for answers. And if they know what your parents found, they'll be looking for Lily too. He gestured to the back door, where Grizz was now installing a new, reinforced lock. We're making this place a fortress, Sarah. But a fortress can only hold for so long if the enemy is already inside. Later, as dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, Lily, emboldened by the silver coin and the constant presence of the bikers, approached Hammer again. He was sitting on the porch swing, polishing a piece of chrome on his motorcycle. "Hammer?" she asked softly. He looked up, his strong features softened by the fading light. "Yeah, kiddo. The bad men. They don't like bright lights, do they?" He considered her question, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "No, Lily. They definitely don't like bright lights." "Good," she declared, a new resolve in her small voice. "Because I'm not scared anymore. Not really. And I'm going to make them go away." She held up the silver coin, gleaming faintly in the twilight. "This is a brave coin, right?" Hammer nodded, his gaze meeting Sarah's over Lily's head. A silent understanding passed between them. "The bravest," he confirmed. "And you, Lily, are the bravest girl I know."